Photographic exposure is primarily determined by three key settings on a camera. These settings are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Aperture controls the size of the lens opening, affecting the amount of light admitted. Shutter speed dictates the duration the camera's sensor is exposed to light. ISO determines the sensitivity of the camera's sensor to light. Together, these elements control the final image's brightness and clarity. Aperture is defined as the opening within a lens that controls the passage of light. A wider aperture setting permits a greater amount of light to enter the camera. This increased light results in brighter images and a shallow depth of field. Conversely, a smaller aperture reduces light intake and increases the depth of field, sharpening the entire scene. Shutter speed defines the time the camera sensor is exposed to light. Faster shutter speeds reduce light intake and freeze motion. Slower shutter speeds increase light intake and blur motion. Adjusting shutter speed is essential for capturing movement and controlling image brightness. The aperture is the opening inside a camera lens. It regulates the quantity of light that passes to the camera sensor. A wider aperture allows more light to enter the camera. A narrower aperture restricts the amount of light entering the camera. Therefore, aperture size directly influences image brightness. A wide aperture setting, such as f/1.8, permits a significant amount of light to pass through the camera lens. This large opening results in a shallow depth of field within the photograph. The subject of the photo appears sharply focused, drawing the viewer's attention. The background is rendered with a soft blur, effectively isolating the subject, which is ideal for portrait and fashion photography. A narrow aperture, such as f/16, limits the amount of light that passes through the lens. This restriction results in a greater depth of field within the image. Consequently, objects from the foreground to the background appear sharply focused. This technique is ideal for landscape and architectural photography, where overall sharpness is desired. Shutter speed determines the length of time a camera's sensor is exposed to light. It is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. Shutter speed directly influences the way motion is captured in an image. A faster shutter speed equates to a shorter exposure time. Conversely, a slower shutter speed means a longer exposure time. Fast shutter speeds are crucial for freezing motion in sports photography. Shutter speeds of 1/10 or faster are typically necessary. These speeds ensure subjects appear sharp and clear, even when moving quickly. The result is a precise capture of a moment in time, free from motion blur. Slow shutter speeds are employed to induce motion blur in photographs. A slow shutter speed, such as 1/10 seconds or slower, is required. When photographing waterfalls, this technique renders the water silky smooth. This effect conveys a sense of motion and fluidity in the water. ISO is a camera setting that controls the sensitivity of the image sensor to light. A lower ISO value, such as ISO 100, indicates lower sensitivity to light. ISO 100 is often used in well-lit environments to produce cleaner images. Increasing the ISO value makes the sensor more sensitive, allowing for brighter images in low light. However, higher ISO settings can introduce more noise or grain into the image. The photograph demonstrates the outcome of using a low ISO setting, ISO 100. It was taken in bright daylight, providing optimal lighting conditions. The image is clean, sharp, and well lit, showcasing high quality. This illustrates that a low ISO setting equates to high-quality images when lighting is optimal. Increasing ISO raises the camera sensor's sensitivity to light. Higher ISO settings brighten the image, but also increase digital noise. A split screen demonstrates the noise difference between low and high ISO settings. It's important to keep ISO as low as possible to maintain image quality. Increase ISO only when necessary, due to insufficient light. ISO is a last resort for brightness. Use it wisely. The exposure triangle is a fundamental concept in photography. It consists of three key elements: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These three settings determine the overall brightness, exposure of a photograph. Aperture controls the amount of light entering the camera lens. Shutter speed determines how long the camera's sensor is exposed to light. ISO measures the sensitivity of the camera's sensor to light. Low light conditions require specific camera adjustments to achieve proper exposure. A wider aperture, for example, f divided by 2.8, allows more light to enter the camera lens. Slower shutter speeds, for example, 1 divided by 30 seconds, increase the time the sensor has to capture light. Combining a wide aperture and slow shutter speed compensates for insufficient light. Wide apertures result in a shallow depth of field, blurring the background. This shallow depth of field can be used creatively to isolate the subject. In bright daylight, controlling light exposure is crucial for optimal image quality. A narrow aperture, such as f divided by 16, limits the amount of light entering the camera lens. A fast shutter speed, like 1 divided by 250 seconds, further reduces light exposure to prevent overexposure. A narrow aperture increases the depth of field, keeping more of the scene in focus. Maintaining a low ISO setting minimizes image noise in well-lit conditions. These settings counteract the effects of bright lighting, ensuring balanced and detailed photographs.